Hey guys, sleeping historian here. Tonight we step away from the cozy comfort of your bed and follow a path you probably shouldn't take unless you've updated your will. The air here is already thicker, cooler, as though someone turned down the thermostat of the world. You hear no birds, no distant cars, just that faint, pulsing hum that might be your own heartbeat, or maybe it's the underground breathing back at you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and your local time down in the comments. I like to imagine where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a sloping trail that leads downward through a curtain of mist. The ground beneath your shoes feels strange, too soft for stone, too hard for soil, as if something ancient and unnameable is compacted underfoot. The air smells faintly of iron and rain, even though there's no sky here, just a low, pearlescent glow from somewhere ahead. The path is not marked, yet you know it's the right one. Stories from every culture have whispered about this threshold. The Greeks spoke of the entrance at Cape Tainaran. The ancient Egyptians imagined a hidden door in the sands of the West, and in Norse sagas, you'd have to cross into Hell's frozen domain. Oddly enough, each one insists the way down begins where the world seems to pause, places without wind, without animals, without any sign of change. You feel that pause now. The leaves overhead are still, though you can't remember hearing leaves before this moment. Somewhere behind you, the rest of the world is still moving on, people eating dinner, walking their dogs, texting. And here you are, stepping into a myth you're not sure you'll walk back from. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll have a great story for the comments section, assuming Wi-Fi works beyond the grave. A faint warmth brushes past your arm. It's not wind. It feels more like the breath of something enormous that has just leaned close enough to sniff you. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures genuinely believed these entrances were physical locations, or if they were always metaphorical. Either way, you're in no mood to test the theory by turning back. Ahead, the mist parts to reveal an archway of rock. Its surface is carved with spirals, sunbursts, and faces in profile, some smiling, some weeping. If you were a scholar, you might recognize patterns shared between Mayan tomb inscriptions and Etruscan burial art. But since you're you, the main thought is, that face looks suspiciously like the one on the "we need to talk" emoji. You step closer. The temperature drops just enough to raise goosebumps, though your skin feels almost too tight, like the air here is gently pulling at you. A fringe detail the guides never mention. Ancient Greek pilgrims sometimes brought little cakes of honey and barley to bribe whatever they met beyond. You have no honey cakes. Your snack stash is just an opened pack of mints in your pocket. Hope the underworld likes peppermint. The first sound from ahead reaches you. A slow, rhythmic drip, like water falling from a cavern sealing into a deep pool. The sound echoes far longer than it should, as though the drop is falling through centuries before it lands. That's when you notice the archway is no longer framed by rock, but by darkness so absolute it feels physical. The old stories warn that the first step through is the hardest, not because of fear, but because you're leaving behind the idea of time. Down here, clocks mean nothing. The Egyptians believed the Jewet, their underworld, was a place where night and day twisted together in looping rivers. The Greeks had no sunrise in Hades, only a gray light that never shifted. And here, as you lift your foot toward that black threshold, you feel the faintest shiver in your chest, like your body knows it's about to lose track of the sun forever. One step and the air changes entirely. The smell of rain vanishes, replaced by something older, the faint tang of stone that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years. Your footsteps make no sound. It's unsettling, so you cough softly just to prove you still make noise. The sound comes out muted, like it's been wrapped in wool. Your eyes adjust. Shapes appear, pillars that look like they've grown from the ground rather than been built, their surfaces rippling with patterns that shift when you're not looking directly at them. You pass one and swear the grooves form the outline of a handprint, but it's far too large to be human. Somewhere far ahead, there's movement, slow, deliberate. A shadow flickers past the edge of your vision, but when you turn, the space is empty. That might be fine, except for the fact that you can still hear it moving, footsteps packing in perfect sync with your own. You speed up and so does it. You stop and it stops. A joke comes to mind. Whoever's following me, could you at least carry my bag? But your voice catches, so you keep it to yourself. A glow begins to form up ahead, as if a candle is burning somewhere beyond a bend in the path. It's not the warm gold of a normal flame. It's cooler, almost bluish, like moonlight trapped in liquid. The light pulses faintly, timed with your heartbeat. As you walk toward it, the ground beneath you changes texture, smooth, cold stone. Every few steps, you pass small piles of coins scattered across the floor, their surfaces tarnished into rainbow colors. The Greeks used coins for Charon, the ferryman, to pay for passage across the Styx. Here, though, there's no boat in sight, just the faint sound of water somewhere deeper in the dark. Your pulse quickens, but not entirely from fear. There's a strange pull here, a sense that you've already begun to belong. That's the real trick of the underworld. By the time you notice how far you've gone, you're already too far to climb back out without permission. The path bends again, the bluish glow now bright enough to show the cavern stretching wide before you. And there, just beyond a narrow stone ledge, is the river you've heard about in stories your whole life. Black as ink, moving without a ripple, as though the water isn't liquid at all but some kind of living shadow. The current whispers, not in words but in the sound of pages turning in a book you can't quite read. The descent has only just begun. The black river lies before you like a mirror turned inward, reflecting nothing you recognize, not even your own face. It stretches so wide you can't see the far bank, only a smudge of darker shadow against the dark. The air is cooler here, heavy with a dampness that clings to your skin as if the river is breathing on you. There's no lapping at the shore, no ripple to mark the water's passage, just that low, steady hush, like the sound of silk sliding over silk. You know the name of this place without needing to be told. Every culture has one. The Greeks called it the Styx, or sometimes Acheron, depending on which poet you ask. In Norse myths, it's G-Ural, bridged by a span of gold leading to Hell's Gates. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was the Huber, guarded by scorpion men. Historians still argue whether these rivers were meant to be literal bodies of water or symbolic thresholds between states of being. But standing here now, you're pretty sure you'd rather not test the swimming option. A faint splash echoes somewhere upstream, though the water doesn't move. You glance left and right, half expecting to see some pale, skeletal boatman drifting toward you, but there's only fog curling low across the surface. And then you notice something peculiar. Shapes beneath the water, too still to be fish, too large to be rocks. The surface is so dark it takes time for your eyes to pick them out. Faces, countless faces, suspended just below, eyes closed as though asleep. Every few seconds, one mouth moves in a silent word. Maybe they're dreaming. Maybe they're trying to warn you. On the shore beside you lies a flat stone, its top polished smooth, and on it rests a single bronze coin. It's worn nearly to nothing, but you can still make out the faint profile of a long-forgotten ruler. The practical part of your brain wonders if you should take it. The rest of you is screaming that maybe leaving mysterious death coins exactly where they are is the smarter choice. You crouch, your reflection barely visible in the still water. For a moment, the face staring back isn't yours. It's older, the eyes hollow, but somehow more aware than your own. Then it's gone, replaced by nothing but darkness. That's fine. Totally fine. Happens all the time in ancient mythic rivers. A scraping sound draws your attention to your right. From the fog emerges a narrow craft, carved from something that might once have been wood but now looks petrified. It moves without oars, gliding closer until it rests in the shallows. Standing in it is not the skeletal boatman of your imagination, but a figure hooded in fabric that seems to drink in the dim light. You can't see a face, only the suggestion of where one might be. The figure says nothing. Instead, a pale hand extends toward you, palm up. The gesture is unmistakable: payment. You pat your pockets, one pack of mints, your phone, a crumpled receipt from that sandwich place you like. The ferryman does not appear impressed. You're about to stammer something awkward when you remember the tarnished coins scattered on the floor earlier. You retrace your steps quickly, scoop one up, and return. The coin feels oddly warm in your palm, almost like it's pulsing. You drop it into the waiting hand. The ferryman tilts their head slightly. Approval, maybe, and gestures for you to step into the boat. The craft is narrower than you expect, barely enough room for you to sit without tipping over. Yet when you do, it's steady, as if the water itself has stiffened to support it. The ferryman remains silent, guiding the boat forward with no visible motion. As you glide, you notice the water isn't entirely black. It has threads of faint light running through it, like veins of moonlight under glass. Every so often, one of those threads flares brighter, and you hear a sound, faint but distinct: laughter or weeping or a snatch of music. You lean over the edge, and for a split second you see a memory, not yours, play across the surface. A child running through a field of wheat. A soldier in ancient armor raising a cup in a torchlit hall. Then the light fades, and the water swallows it whole. A curious fact comes to mind. In some Roman traditions, souls were ferried not once but 3 times, across 3 different rivers, each representing a deeper stage of separation from the living. That idea is deeply comforting when you realize this might just be the first of several boat rides tonight. The fog thickens. Land disappears entirely, and the only constant is the sound of the water's whisper. You wonder if the ferryman will speak, but perhaps their silence is part of the toll. Instead, they lift a hand and point ahead. Through the fog, a faint glow appears, not the bluish shimmer of before, but a cold, pale light, as if from marble under moonlight. The boat slows as the shore emerges, a low strip of stone leading to a set of carved steps. Above them looms a gate, tall, arched, flanked by 2 statues of creatures with human bodies and the heads of jackals. Their stone eyes follow you as you step off the boat. The ferryman remains in the shallows, waiting perhaps for another passenger. You're on your own now. The gate yawns open without a sound, inviting you into whatever lies beyond. Somewhere deep inside, a voice reminds you that crossing a river is never just travel, it's transformation. And in the underworld, that transformation rarely goes backward. The gate towers above you, its arch carved with symbols you don't recognize but instinctively understand. Warnings, bargains, and maybe a recipe for bread if you're fluent in the language of the dead. Each jackal-headed statue on either side leans forward just enough to make you wonder if they could step down at any moment. Their stone muzzles are closed, but you can almost feel a low growl vibrating in the air. You cross the threshold and the temperature shifts again, less cold now, more deliberate, as if the air has been tailored to keep you alert but not comfortable. The light here is neither day nor night, a hazy twilight that doesn't seem to come from any source you can point to. Shadows are present, but they don't obey the usual rules. They stretch in the wrong directions, curl like smoke, and sometimes don't seem attached to anything at all. The space ahead widens into a broad hall. Its floor is inlaid with tiles of deep red and black, forming intricate patterns that twist like mazes when you look at them too long. This is the place of the gatekeepers. Every story has them, the beings who decide whether you can go further or must turn back. In Egyptian belief, the soul faced 42 assessors, each asking a question about your life. In Greek myth, 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, held court over new arrivals. And in some African traditions, the gatekeeper isn't even a person but a trickster spirit, testing your cleverness before letting you pass. Here, there is just one. You notice them before you hear them. A tall, thin figure standing in the center of the hall, draped in a robe that pools onto the floor. The robe is stitched with countless eyes, some open, some closed, some blinking at you lazily. The figure's face is masked in polished obsidian, so reflective that for a moment you think you're looking into another river. When they speak, The voice is neither male nor female, but carries the calm weight of someone who's been asking the same question for millennia. Do you know your own name? It's not as simple as it sounds. You open your mouth to answer, but something about the way they're watching makes you second-guess yourself. Do they mean your living name? Your true name? The name whispered about you behind your back? The ancient Mesopotamians believed knowing a soul's true name gave power over it. Handing it over lightly could be dangerous. I do, you say carefully. The figure tilts their head. Then keep it close. You may need it to find your way back. They step aside, but another presence emerges from the far wall, literally out of it, as though the stone has liquefied into shadow. This second guardian is squat and broad, with arms that hang almost to the floor. Where its face should be is only a mouth, stretched into a constant grin, lined with teeth far too numerous to count. It claps its hands once. The sound echoes like a door slamming. Answer and pass, it says in a tone much cheerier than expected. Fail and well, we'll improvise. It gestures to a stone slab that rises from the floor between you. On it lies a small assortment of objects: a feather, a key, a cracked clay tablet, and what looks suspiciously like a half-eaten sandwich. The guardian asks, which of these is the lightest? You blink. That's it. The ancient Egyptians used the feather of Mad to weigh the truth of a soul against a human heart. Here, the question seems almost too easy, unless, of course, the feather is cursed, the key is hollow, the sandwich is a metaphysical concept, and the clay tablet is made of aerogel. You reach for the feather, half expecting it to turn into a crow and fly away. It doesn't. The guardian grins wider if that's possible. Good enough, it says, stepping back. As you pass, you feel the faint brush of something at your ankle, like a leash being removed. You wonder if you were even aware of being restrained until this moment. The first guardian with the obsidian mask calls after you. Remember, most who enter forget to listen. It's a strange warning, but you tuck it away. The corridor beyond is narrower, the ceiling low enough that you have to bow your head slightly. The walls are covered in carvings, not of battles or kings, but of everyday life. You see a mother braiding her child's hair, a fisherman mending a net, a group of friends laughing around a table. It's almost comforting until you realize some of the figures are slowly turning their heads to watch you as you walk past. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. In certain rural Chinese ghost tales, the first spirit you meet in the underworld might offer you tea, but drinking it makes you forget your entire life. That way, you pass through without pain. Looking at these carvings, you half wonder if the underworld has already offered you its own version of tea, and if you've accidentally sipped it. The passage ends in another set of steps, spiraling downward. As you descend, you hear voices, whispers at first, then clearer. They're speaking in different languages, overlapping but strangely comprehensible. Some call your name, others tell you to turn back, and a few just laugh quietly as though they know exactly what's coming next. The steps open into a vast, dimly lit chamber. The sound here is fuller, more echoing. You realize you've entered the Hall of Echoes, and those voices aren't just strangers. They're fragments of the living world, still calling after you. And just like that, the gatekeepers are behind you, and their riddles, easy or not, have already done their work. The Hall of Echoes stretches out before you like a canyon carved entirely from sound. The floor is a glossy black stone that reflects faint light in ripples, and above you, the ceiling vanishes into darkness. The air here tastes faintly metallic, like the inside of an old coin, and carries the low, constant hum of countless overlapping voices. At first, you think the whispers are coming from somewhere deep in the shadows, but then you realize they're rising up from the stone itself, as if the floor has been soaking in words for centuries and is now letting them seep back out. Some are so faint you can barely hear them. Others are close enough that they make the hairs on your arms stand up. You catch a phrase in a language you don't speak, and yet somehow you understand it. You forgot the bread in the oven. Another voice, trembling, Don't open the box. And then, startlingly, one in your own voice. You're running out of time. You keep walking, but the closer you listen, the more the voices begin to tug at you. Some are pleading, some are mocking, and a few sound exactly like people you know. This is where the underworld gets sneaky. It offers you just enough familiarity to make you think you could turn back, to make you forget that returning isn't part of the deal. A mainstream fact flashes through your mind. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus visited the underworld and spoke with the shades of the dead, who were drawn to him by offerings of blood. Here, there's no need for offerings. The voices are already reaching for you, hungry for the warmth of a living ear. The chamber narrows ahead, and you pass beneath a low arch carved with rows of faces, dozens of them, each mouth open in a frozen cry. The stone is worn smooth where countless hands have touched it, as though travelers before you believed touching the faces would give them some advantage. You brush your fingers over one out of curiosity, and the stone mouth exhales warm air. You step back quickly. That's when you notice them, shapes moving within the dark reflections on the floor. At first, you think they're your own shadow distorted by the strange lighting, but no. They're separate, slightly delayed, like echoes of your body in visual form. Each one moves when you move, but with tiny differences. A tilt of the head you didn't make, a step taken when you stood still. Historians still argue whether such reflected spirits in ancient folklore were meant to represent fragments of the soul or trickster entities that mimic the living. Whatever the case, these shadows seem interested in more than just copying you. One reaches upward, palm pressing flat against the floor beneath your feet. You can feel it, an almost electrical buzz, as if it's testing the boundary between its side and yours. You keep moving. The voices get louder, a chorus now, filling the space with layered sound that's almost musical, almost unbearable. Somewhere deep in the hall, a single note rings out, clear, pure, and somehow heavier than any other. The other voices hush for a moment, then resume with renewed urgency. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some medieval European ghost beliefs held that the dead could send messages through echoes. If you heard your own words bounce back slightly wrong, it meant a spirit was answering, which is deeply comforting as you notice that when you mutter, "This is fine," under your breath, the echo that returns is, "No, it is." Ahead, a faint glow appears, revealing a bridge of black glass spanning a pit so deep it swallows the light before it reaches the bottom. The bridge has no railings, just a narrow span polished smooth. On either side of it, the walls ripple, not with water but with moving images, moments from lives that aren't yours. A child dropping an ice cream cone and bursting into tears. A king signing a treaty with a trembling hand. A woman sitting by a hospital bed, whispering to someone just out of sight. You step onto the bridge, each footfall ringing like a struck bell. The images shift faster now, flickering past so quickly you can't keep up. Some make you want to smile, others leave a cold knot in your stomach. Halfway across, one freezes in place. A doorway slightly ajar with darkness beyond. You don't recognize it, but you know that if you step through it, you'll never come back. You force yourself to keep walking. By the time you reach the far side, the voices have softened again, becoming nothing more than a faint background hum. The floor here is plain stone, and the walls are bare. For the first time in what feels like hours, there's no trick of sound or shadow, just a simple doorway ahead, framed in gold leaf so faded it looks almost gray. You step through and feel the atmosphere shift again. This time, it's heavier, like you've walked into a room that's been waiting for you specifically. You know without being told that this is where the truth gets measured, and whatever the voices in the hall were trying to say, you've already carried them with you. The room you enter is enormous, but the silence inside makes it feel even bigger. No whispers, no echoes, just a stillness so deep it seems to press against your ears. The air here is warmer, scented faintly with something like sandalwood and ash. At the far end stands a single pedestal, and behind it, a figure whose presence fills the space more than their size should allow. They are tall, draped in white linen bound with a golden sash, and their head is that of a bird, sleek, curved beak, eyes sharp as cut glass. Even without knowing the myths, you'd recognize Thoth, the ancient Egyptian god of wisdom and writing. Or perhaps here they are something older, a composite of every judge and scribe who's ever weighed a soul. To your left, another figure waits in shadow, massive and squat, with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. The Egyptians called her Ammit, the devourer. You decide instantly you'd prefer to keep her as an acquaintance rather than a dinner date. Before you lies a low table of polished obsidian. Upon it rests a set of golden scales so delicate they seem almost to float in place. On one pan is a single white feather, impossibly clean and weightless. The other pan is empty for now. Thoth's gaze settles on you, and though no words are spoken, you understand exactly what is expected. Your heart, not the metaphorical one but the core of your being, will be measured against that feather. If it's lighter, you pass. If heavier, well, you've already met Ammit. Historians still argue whether the ancient weighing of the heart was ever meant as a literal post-mortem event or simply a moral guide for the living. Standing here, with the devourer's golden eyes fixed on you, the academic question feels extremely unhelpful. Thoth gestures toward a small basin before the table. The surface of the water is so clear you can see your own reflection, but it doesn't move when you do. Instead, it shows you flashes, moments from your life you'd rather not revisit. The time you lied because it was easier. The person you didn't help when you could have. The thing you took and never returned. Each one ripples through the water like a stone dropped in a pond, sending a faint tremor up your spine. You notice something odd. Some moments seem slightly wrong, twisted at the edges, as though the underworld itself is nudging the narrative. A quirky tidbit from archaeology drifts through your mind. Certain tomb paintings in Thebes depict hearts being pulled heavier by hidden figures, little reminders that even divine judgment might have loopholes. Finally, Thoth lifts a hand and the water stills. You feel a strange tug in your chest, not painful but deeply unsettling, as if invisible fingers have reached inside and plucked something warm from your ribs. In your hands, you're now holding it, your heart. It doesn't beat, it glows faintly, and it's heavier than you imagined. You place it on the empty pan. The scales sway gently, the feather trembling on its own side. For a long moment, neither pan moves. You can feel Ammit's gaze like hot breath on the back of your neck. Then slowly, the scales tilt toward the feather. Your heart is lighter just enough. Thoth inclines their head in a nod so subtle it could be mistaken for the shifting of a shadow. Ammit snorts, clearly disappointed, and slinks back into the deeper dark. The scales vanish, the pedestal with them. All that remains is the faint scent of sandalwood and a doorway that wasn't there before. It leads into a passage that descends at a sharper angle than anything you've walked so far. You step into it, feeling the ground change underfoot, stone giving way to something rougher, almost like hardened soil. The air cools again, and from somewhere far ahead comes the sound of slow, steady breathing. You can't tell if it's human. A mainstream fact slips into your thoughts. In many cultures, surviving judgment was not the end, but the start of a deeper descent. The idea being that only the worthy were permitted to face the more dangerous regions below. Congratulations, apparently you qualify. The breathing grows louder, but now there's another sound layered beneath it. A low skittering like claws or nails dragging across stone. The passage narrows, forcing you to duck your head. The walls are lined with carvings again, but this time they depict not the living world but strange, twisted landscapes. Forests made of bones, rivers of molten glass, skis filled with enormous, watching eyes. You remember the warning from the obsidian-masked gatekeeper. Most who enter forget to listen. You realize too late that the breathing has stopped, but the skittering hasn't. Something is moving in the dark ahead, and you're going to have to go through it to keep descending. The passage tightens until you're forced to turn your shoulders sideways. your palms brushing the rough, cold walls. The skittering grows sharper, quicker, like 1,000 tiny knives dancing across stone. The air smells faintly of damp earth and something acrid, almost metallic. Your eyes strain against the dark until you realize there is light, faint, phosphorescent streaks running along the ceiling in irregular lines. They look like veins, pulsing faintly with a sickly green glow, and they give just enough illumination to see what lies ahead. The tunnels branch and twist unpredictably, forming a labyrinth that feels alive. Some walls pulse like muscle, others crumble into dust if you touch them. In certain ancient Greek funeral rites, small lead tablets were inscribed with protective charms for the journey below, and you can't help wishing you had one in your pocket now. Historians still argue whether these charms were meant to ward off literal underworld creatures or just the metaphorical demons of guilt and regret. A sudden flicker of movement makes you freeze. Something long and jointed slides across the junction ahead, vanishing into a side tunnel. You catch the glint of many eyes, too many for comfort, and the whisper of claws. The skittering stops again. You step forward cautiously, only to discover the floor has shifted beneath your feet. It's no longer flat stone but narrow ridges, as though you're walking across the spine of something buried just under the surface. Each step sends a faint vibration through it, and you're half afraid you might be waking whatever it belongs to. The tunnels here are not empty. You start to see shapes embedded in the walls, hands, faces, entire torsos twisted into the stone as if they'd been swallowed by it mid-stride. Some look human, others don't. Their mouths hang open but no sound comes out. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Certain ancient Siberian burial sites have skeletons posed in contorted positions as though caught in the middle of flight. Archaeologists chalk it up to ritual. You're not so sure. You take the left fork at the next split, guided only by the faintest whisper of airflow. The passage tightens again before abruptly opening into a small chamber. The phosphorescent lines along the ceiling here glow brighter, revealing the source of the skittering. It's not one creature, it's dozens. Insects the size of rats, their carapaces made of what looks like chipped obsidian. They move in unison, flowing along the walls like a living tide, pausing only to turn their cluster of reflective eyes toward you. For a moment, you think they might swarm, but instead they part, forming a narrow, twitching path straight through the chamber. You're not sure if it's a gesture of passage or a trap, but standing still seems worse. You walk between them, your shoulders tense, every instinct screaming at you not to touch their glossy shells. They click softly as you pass, the sound oddly synchronized, like teeth chattering in a cold wind. At the far side of the chamber, the tunnel slopes downward at a steeper angle. The walls become slick, forcing you to brace yourself against them to avoid slipping. The phosphorescence fades, and soon the only light comes from a faint orange glow ahead. When you reach it, you find the tunnel has opened onto a ledge overlooking a vast cavern. The air is dry here, and the heat is immediate, prickling your skin. Below, an underground chasm stretches into darkness, lit only by rivers of molten rock that wind like snakes through the floor. The orange light you saw is the reflection of that flow against the cavern walls. A narrow path hugs the wall, spiraling down toward the floor far below. You start down it, feeling the stone radiate heat through your shoes. Far beneath you, something shifts in the molten rivers, a shape just large enough to disturb the flow, though you can't make out details from here. It's only when you've nearly reached the bottom that you notice movement on the opposite bank. Figures, tall and thin, each carrying staffs topped with shards of glowing crystal. They walk in silence, stepping carefully along the riverside, their faces hidden under wide hoods. You think they might be herders, except what they're herding are shapes under the molten surface, guiding them along the glowing current. The underworld is bigger than you imagined, and these tunnels of endless night are only its arteries, paths used by those who belong here. You're just passing through, and the realization settles heavily on your shoulders. You are a guest in a place where guests rarely last. At the far end of the cavern, another tunnel yawns open, swallowing the path into deeper dark. You step into it, grateful to leave the heat behind, but uneasy about what you'll find next. The new tunnel is cooler, but the air here is dry enough to make your throat feel like paper. Your footsteps crunch faintly over a thin layer of dust, so fine it rises in little swirls around your ankles. After a few paces, you realize it's not dust at all, it's ash. The passage widens into a plain stretching so far you can't see its edges. The ground is a flat, pale expanse, littered with broken columns, toppled statues, and fragments of walls that lead nowhere. Every ruin is worn smooth, as if it's been sandblasted for centuries. There's no wind here, yet the air carries the faint smell of something long extinguished. This is the Forgotten Fields. You don't remember how you know the name, but it fits. Every culture has some version of this place, where souls go when no one remembers them, when their names are lost from every tongue. In the Aztec underworld of Mictlan, it's the barren plain before the final trials. In certain African traditions, it's a place where the dead wander until a descendant calls them home by speaking their name. Historians still argue whether this second death was feared more than the first. You walk among the ruins, noticing faces carved into some of the fallen stone. They're worn beyond recognition, the features blurred into anonymity. Every so often, you pass a figure standing perfectly still. At first, you think they're statues, but when you get closer, you see the faint rise and fall of their chests. They stand with their heads bowed, as if waiting for something that will never come. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. In certain Polynesian traditions, names were believed to be a kind of anchor for the soul. Lose the name, and the soul could drift away entirely. Looking at these still figures, you can't help wondering if they've already begun to drift. One of them moves, just a slight turn of the head, enough for you to see a face so blurred it's like staring at a photo that's been smudged. The mouth opens and you hear nothing, no voice, not even the sound of breath. Yet somehow you understand what they're asking. Do you know me? You don't. The figure stills again, and the weight of that failure lingers as you walk on. The plain is deceptively quiet. From far off, you hear a faint metallic ringing like the echo of a distant bell. You head toward it, picking your way over cracked flagstones and piles of shattered pottery. The sound grows clearer until you find its source, a small, upright frame of rusted metal, swaying gently. Hanging from it is a thin strip of bronze, engraved with markings you can't read. When you touch it, the metal vibrates faintly under your fingers, and a rush of images floods your mind. Someone's first laugh, a hand grasping another in the rain, a warm kitchen filled with the smell of bread. Then the images vanish, leaving you empty and cold. The strip stops swaying. You continue on, feeling the ash grow deeper beneath your feet. It rises until it covers your shoes entirely, soft and muffling. The figures you pass now are kneeling, their hands buried in the ash as if searching for something. One pulls up a small stone, polishes it, then lets it fall again without looking at you. The horizon here is a shifting haze, but eventually you see shapes in the distance, taller, more solid. As you approach, you realize it's a wall. Not a fortress wall, but a barrier made of stacked memory stones, each one engraved with a name. Some are fresh and sharp, others are worn smooth. You run your fingers over a few and the sensation is electric, tiny flashes of moments from lives you've never known. Then your hand rests on a stone that feels different. You can't read the name. The letters blur the moment you try to focus. But the stone is warm, as if someone just left it here. Before you can think too much about it, the ground shudders faintly under your feet. The air changes, heavier, charged. From somewhere beyond the wall, you hear a deep, slow creaking, like something vast shifting its weight. There's a narrow arch in the wall ahead, and you step through without hesitation. The instant you do, the air changes again, thicker, richer, almost sweet. In the distance, lights flicker, and the ash gives way to smooth stone. You've reached the threshold of something grand, though you can't tell yet if it's meant to welcome or consume you. The smooth stone under your feet is cool, and it almost feels like a relief after trudging through that endless plain of ash. The corridor beyond the arch is wider than any you've walked so far, tall enough that the ceiling is lost in shadow. Light seeps in from somewhere unseen, soft, golden, almost sunset warm, though there's no sky here to explain it. You follow the light until the space ahead opens into an immense hall. The floor is polished black basalt, so smooth it reflects the flicker of dozens, no, hundreds of small flames suspended in midair. They're not held by torches or lamps. They simply hover, each flame about the size of your palm. As you step closer, you see they're not really flames at all, but glowing motes, each one shifting in color like an oil slick. This is the Hall of Echoes. You don't remember learning its name, but it feels correct. In medieval Christian lore, some theologians describe the underworld not as endless torment, but as a place where souls relived their memories until they understood every choice they'd ever made. Historians still argue whether those writings were meant as metaphor or a very literal travel guide for the dead. Each glowing mote here is a memory, suspended and shimmering. You step near one and it flares brighter, showing you a fragment of someone else's life. A child letting go of a paper lantern into the night sky, the wind catching it just right. A hand tracing words in the dirt. A face breaking into a smile that feels so real you almost smile back. Then the light dims, drifting away like it's had enough of you. A quirky fact tickles your mind. In certain Celtic traditions, it was believed you could trap a soul inside a glass sphere, where it would glow faintly forever. The motes here feel like that idea taken to an impossible extreme. You wander deeper and the air changes, warmer, richer, like the scent of old parchment and candle wax. The floor patterns begin to shift, forming spirals and arcs that subtly guide you toward the far end of the hall, where a raised dais holds a single massive object. It's a mirror, taller than you, framed in gold that's tarnished almost black. The glass itself is perfectly still, but not reflective in the way you expect. Instead of showing you, it shows someone else. The figure in the mirror looks a little like you, same height, similar posture, but the details are wrong. The eyes are darker, the mouth set in a line that doesn't quite match your own. They watch you steadily, and when you tilt your head, they don't mirror the movement exactly. They're just a fraction behind. You step closer and their lips move. You can't hear the words, but you feel them inside your head, like an echo bouncing off the inside of your skull. The sensation makes your skin crawl. There's a thin path around the dais and you take it, keeping one wary eye on the mirror until it's behind you. Past it, the hall narrows into another passage, this one lined with towering statues. The figures they depict are all different, some human, some animal, some something in between, but every single one is blindfolded. As you walk between them, you notice their heads subtly turn toward you. Not enough to be certain, but enough to make you quicken your pace. The passage opens into a smaller chamber, round and domed. The golden light here is softer, almost dim. In the center of the room is a circular pool, its surface like polished obsidian. No ripples, no reflection, just a black so deep it almost looks like a hole. You kneel beside it, half expecting to see your own face staring back, but instead the surface begins to shimmer. Shapes appear, scenes you don't recognize, voices you've never heard whispering too low to understand. Then, without warning, one of the shapes turns its head directly toward you. It sees you. And then the water stills again, leaving only your own distorted reflection staring back. Something shifts in the room's atmosphere, like the faintest change in air pressure. The hovering motes from the hall begin to drift in through the open passage, settling into a slow orbit around the pool. One dips toward the black surface, touches it, and vanishes in a silent puff of light. Another follows, then another. It feels like you're intruding on something private. You stand and step away from the pool, moving toward the opposite side of the chamber where a low arch leads out. The moment you pass under it, the warm golden light cuts off, replaced by the cold, damp breath of yet another descent. This one slopes sharply down, the walls narrowing again. Somewhere far below, you hear the distant rush of water, or maybe something else entirely. The underworld still has layers you haven't seen, and they're waiting. The slope steepens until you feel your weight shifting forward, each step pressing harder into the stone. The sound of rushing water grows louder, and the air turns cool and misty. You run your hand along the wall for balance. It's slick, the moisture beating against your fingertips like condensation on a cold drink. The passage spills you out onto a narrow ledge overlooking a cavern so vast it swallows sound. Below, an underground river churns, black and fast, its surface broken by jagged rocks. A faint phosphorescent glow rises from the water, casting ghostly light onto the stalactites hanging overhead. This is the Styx, or at least one version of it. In Greek mythology, the river Styx was more than a mere boundary. Its waters were said to bind gods to their oaths. Break a promise sworn on the Styx, and you'd face a year of unconsciousness followed by 9 more years in exile. Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks saw this river as a literal location or a poetic metaphor for the point of no return. You notice a narrow dock to your right, carved directly from the cavern wall. A boat waits there, long and flat-bottomed, its wood so dark it's almost black. At its stern stands a figure wrapped in layers of tattered cloth, the folds hiding every detail except for 2 hands, thin, bone-pale fingers curling over the boat's edge. You approach, and without a word, the figure gestures for you to step aboard. You hesitate, then remember a quirky tidbit. In some ancient Chinese burial traditions, small clay models of boats were placed in tombs, believed to help the deceased cross dangerous waters in the afterlife. You wonder if you've somehow stumbled into the real thing. The figure doesn't ask for payment. No coin under your tongue, no silver piece for the ferryman. But you can't shake the feeling that you've agreed to something just by stepping into the boat. It rocks slightly under your weight, and the moment you sit, the ferryman pushes off with a long pole, guiding you into the current. The river pulls hard. The sound of water striking the rocks is a constant roar, but beneath it you think you hear something else, a low murmur like hundreds of overlapping voices. You lean over the side, peering into the glowing depths, and see shapes just beneath the surface. Faces. Some calm, some twisted in expressions you can't read, all drifting in the current. One turns toward you, mouth opening wide as if to shout, and the sound is swallowed instantly by the rushing water. The ferryman does not look at you. The current takes you toward a section of the river where the cavern narrows, and the glow from the water intensifies. The air here smells faintly metallic, and your teeth ache as if you've bitten into something cold. You pass through a section where the walls close in so tightly you could reach out and touch both sides, and for a moment you feel as though the rock is leaning in, listening. Then the passage widens again and you see another dock ahead. But this one isn't carved from stone. It's made of something pale, almost ivory-like, smooth and slightly curved. It takes you a moment to realize they're massive bones, laid side by side to form a platform. The boat slows as the ferryman pulls you in, the sound of wood against bone a hollow, unnerving scrape. You step off the boat, and before you can thank or question the ferryman, they're already pushing back into the current, vanishing into the dark without so much as a backward glance. The bone dock leads to a tunnel whose floor is strewn with what looks like river gravel, though each step makes an oddly brittle crunch. You glance down and see it's not gravel at all. It's tiny fragments of shells, each one faintly luminous. The walls curve in, smooth and pale, and you notice faint etchings here and there, spirals, concentric circles, lines that intersect like constellations. The air is warmer here, but the sound of the river follows you, fatting gradually as you go deeper. Ahead, the tunnel bends sharply, and when you round the corner, you find yourself in another cavern. This one is dry, its floor a mosaic of dark tiles. In the center, a single column rises to the ceiling, carved with countless names. You step closer and see that the names aren't fixed. They shift, rearranging themselves, letters flowing like water. You watch your own name flicker into existence for just a heartbeat before dissolving into another. The far end of the cavern holds yet another opening, but this one pulses faintly with a reddish glow, like distant embers. The warmth coming from it makes your skin prickle. Whatever lies beyond, it's not as quiet as the river. You take a steadying breath and step toward it. The glow ahead deepens from ember red to molten orange, washing the tunnel walls in shifting light. Heat builds with every step, not the dry, blistering kind of desert air, but the heavy, breath-thick warmth of a furnace that's been running for centuries. The stone underfoot changes texture, growing rougher, speckled with flecks that glint faintly like iron filings. The air smells faintly of minerals, metal, sulfur, and something faintly sweet, like singed fruit. It's not exactly pleasant, but it's oddly compelling, the way some people can't resist the smell of gasoline. You're deep enough now that turning back feels pointless. The underworld seems to curve forward no matter which way you go. When the passage finally opens, you're standing at the lip of a vast chasm. Across the gap, the world looks alive, walls veined with glowing magma, rivers of molten rock crawling lazily down toward a lake that pulses like a living heart. The heat radiates in waves, and far above, you can just make out stone bridges arcing from cliff to cliff like spider silk spun by something impossibly huge. This is the forge, though not the tidy kind where blacksmiths make horseshoes. Myths from many cultures speak of deep earth forges. In Norse sagas, the dwarves forged magical weapons underground. In Japanese folklore, certain oni were said to hammer cursed blades in the volcanic underworld. Historians still argue whether these tales came from real encounters with volcanic caves or just from the human fascination with fire and creation. Down below, you see figures moving in the glow. They're not entirely human, broad-shouldered, with arms corded like tree roots, skin reflecting the firelight like hammered copper. Sparks trail behind them as they work enormous anvils, each strike echoing up through the stone like a heartbeat you can feel in your ribs. A quirky fact drifts into your mind. The ancient Romans sometimes sacrificed miniature tools to Vulcan, their god of fire, hoping he wouldn't send destructive flames into their homes. Here, it feels less like appeasement and more like cooperation. These beings seem as much a part of the forge as the fire itself. You spot a narrow bridge spanning the chasm in front of you. It's not stone or metal, but a single, enormous chain, each link taller than you are, worn smooth in places by untold centuries of footsteps. You test it with your weight, and though it sways faintly, it holds. Below, the molten lake hisses and pops, and the heat licks at your shins. Halfway across, the chain dips slightly, and you pause to look down. A shape moves beneath the lake's surface, not like a fish, but like a shadow shifting just under molten skin. It moves with deliberate slowness, and you realize it's larger than the entire bridge you're standing on. You keep walking. The far end of the chain leads to a stone platform carved into the cliffside. Here, one of the copper-skinned figures is waiting. They don't speak, but they extend a hand, palm up. Their skin radiates heat, and you notice faint inscriptions curling around their forearm, symbols you don't recognize, though they shift when you look too long, as if trying to match a language you might know. The figure turns and leads you through an arched doorway into a tunnel lit by lava flows that trickle like liquid neon through cracks in the walls. The path slopes downward, then levels out into a workshop. It's not filled with weapons or armor, but strange devices, wheels within wheels, spheres that hum softly, thin sheets of blackened metal inscribed with lines so fine they shimmer like spider silk. You can't tell if these are tools, machines, or something more abstract, concepts hammered into physical form. The air hums faintly, a vibration you feel in your teeth. You wonder if this is what creation sounds like when the world's skin is pulled back. The copper-skinned figure moves to one of the anvils and strikes it once. The sound isn't a clang, but a deep, resonant tone that seems to ripple through the room. A panel in the wall slides open, revealing a narrow stair that winds downward. The figure gestures for you to descend. You do, each step cooler than the last, until the heat fades completely and the stone grows damp again. When you reach the bottom, you find yourself facing yet another tunnel, this one lit only by faint blue crystals embedded in the walls. Their glow pulses slowly, like the breathing of something asleep. You glance back, but the panel has already slid shut behind you. The copper-skinned figure is gone, and the only way forward is into this colder, quieter passage. Somewhere ahead, you hear water again, steady, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock that isn't measuring time the way you know it. The tunnel swallows you in its dim blue glow, the light from the crystals washing your skin in a ghostly pallor. The air here feels different, not just cooler but heavier, as if the space itself resists movement. Each step echoes softly, the sound dulled, as though the walls are thick with something that absorbs noise. You run your fingertips over the stone and feel a faint vibration, like the thrum of distant machinery, or maybe a heartbeat. The water sound grows louder as you walk, resolving into a steady drip, 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 irregular enough to feel natural, yet strangely deliberate. It's almost like the cavern is trying to lull you into a rhythm before you see what's ahead. The passage begins to slope downward again, and soon the walls widen, revealing a small underground lake. The surface is perfectly still, so reflective that for a moment you think it's a sheet of black glass. Blue light from the crystals scatters across it, making the surface look like a window into another night sky. You edge closer and your reflection looks wrong. Your features are there but slightly shifted, eyes just a bit too deep, mouth a touch too still. And when you tilt your head, your reflection doesn't follow right away. A shiver creeps down your spine, but you remember a quirky tidbit. In certain Siberian burial traditions, lakes and rivers were thought to be mirrors between worlds, where the living might accidentally glimpse the spirits of the dead. You decide not to stare too long, just in case. There's a narrow walkway skirting the lake, formed from flat slabs of stone. You follow it, feeling the dampness rise from the water in cool bursts. At the far end, you notice a figure sitting cross-legged by the shore. They're dressed in flowing robes that ripple slightly even though there's no wind here. Their head is bowed, hands cupped as if holding something invisible. You approach slowly, and without lifting their head, the figure speaks, not in a language you know, but in a tone that's clearly a question. When you don't answer, they look up. Their eyes are pale, almost milky, but sharp, as if they can see through you rather than at you. They open their hands and you see a tiny sphere of water hovering just above their palms. Inside the droplet is an image faint, shifting, like a seen glimpse through heat haze. You lean closer and recognize something unsettling. A memory. Your memory. One you haven't thought of in years, playing out in miniature inside that single bead of water. The figure closes their hands and the droplet vanishes. They stand and gesture toward a low archway at the edge of the lake. No words, just that silent invitation. Historians still argue whether figures like this, seers, guardians, psychopomps, were ever based on real individuals, or if they were purely symbolic stand-ins for moments of personal reckoning. Right now, you're leaning toward the very real possibility. The archway is small enough that you have to duck to pass through. On the other side, the air grows warmer again, and the light shifts from blue to a dim golden hue. You're in a circular chamber, the walls lined with carvings. They show a single figure walking through various scenes: mountains, forests, rivers, fire, and finally a vast open plain. Each scene is connected by a thin, continuous line that threads its way through the stone, unbroken. In the center of the chamber stands a pedestal. On it lies a narrow strip of cloth, old, frayed, but faintly glowing at the edges. You can't tell if the glow is real or just a trick of the light. Instinctively, you reach out. The fabric feels impossibly soft, almost like it's made from something that used to be alive but isn't anymore. The moment your fingers brush it, the carvings on the walls begin to shift. The continuous line that once wandered through the scenes now starts moving, curling toward the chamber's only exit, a narrow tunnel opposite where you entered. The glow of the fabric intensifies, spilling warmth into your hand. You have the odd sensation that the underworld has just noticed you. The seer's voice carries faintly from behind, speaking that same unknown language. It doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like encouragement. You step toward the tunnel. The air inside smells faintly of dust and old paper, and you can just make out shapes ahead, angular, stacked high, like the skyline of some forgotten city. The fabric in your hand is warm now, and it seems to pulse in sync with your own heartbeat as you go deeper. The tunnel opens so suddenly that you have to blink and readjust your eyes. Before you lies an immense hall, its ceiling lost in darkness, but its walls lined with towering shelves carved directly into the stone. Each shelf groans under the weight of clay tablets, scrolls, bound books with cracked spines, and stranger objects, thin slabs of obsidian etched with patterns that shimmer faintly when you tilt your head. The air smells like a blend of parchment dust, cool earth, and something faintly metallic like old keys. Every sound you make here, your footsteps, your breathing, comes back to you with a muffled delay, as if the hall itself is reluctant to give your noises back. This is the archive. You know it instantly, not because you've been here before, but because it feels inevitable. Myths from across the world hint at such a place. The Greeks spoke of Mnemosyne's pool, where the dead could remember their past lives. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul's deeds were recorded and weighed. In Sumerian lore, underworld scribes kept eternal records on clay tablets. Historians still argue whether these legends were metaphor for memory, bureaucracy, or something more literal. You walk between the shelves, your fingers grazing the spines and surfaces. Some feel warm, some cool. A few seem to vibrate faintly, like they're holding back the urge to speak. You pick one at random, a scroll tied with a thin strip of gold leaf. As you untie it, a rush of images fills your head. A dusty road under a blood-orange sky, the sound of distant flutes, the feeling of thirst you can't quench. It's not your memory. You roll the scroll back up quickly and slide it back into place. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In medieval Europe, monks in some isolated monasteries believed that every sin, no matter how small, left an echo in the spiritual realm, recorded by unseen hands. Looking around, you wonder how many echoes are stored here, and whether they're all human. Farther in, you find a long table littered with half-finished records. A figure sits at the far end, quills scratching rapidly across parchment. They're cloaked in layers of dark fabric, their face obscured by a deep hood. Every few seconds, they pause, tilt their head as if listening to something you can't hear, and then continue writing. You edge closer. Without looking up, they slide a small tablet across the table toward you. It's the size of your palm, carved from some kind of pale stone veined with blue. On its surface is an inscription, not in any alphabet you recognize, but arranged in neat, deliberate rows. The moment you touch it, the symbols shift, twisting into words you can read. Your path is already written, but not yet read. Before you can respond, the figure lifts their head just enough for you to glimpse the eyes beneath the hood, completely black, no whites at all. They raise a gloved finger and point toward a spiral staircase carved into the far wall. The gesture is calm, almost absent-minded, as if sending you onward is part of their daily routine. You climb. The steps are worn smooth, the edges rounded by centuries of use. The higher you go, the warmer the air becomes, and the faint scent of incense starts to filter through the stone. Eventually, the staircase ends at a narrow balcony overlooking the rest of the hall. From up here, the archive stretches out in every direction, vanishing into shadow. You realize it must extend far beyond this single chamber, maybe beyond the underworld itself. On the balcony's railing sits an object you didn't notice at first. A small hourglass, its sand as black as ink. You pick it up and tilt it, but the sand doesn't move until you breathe on it. Then, in a slow, deliberate trickle, it begins to fall. You get the uncanny feeling that something has just started, something that won't stop until the last grain falls. When you set the hourglass back down, a door behind you creaks open on its own. Warm light spills through, along with the faint sound of chanting. The smell of incense grows stronger, mingling with something sharper, ozone, like the air before a storm. You step through the door into a corridor lined with hanging lanterns, each flame swaying gently despite the absence of wind. The chanting grows louder, layered with the low, resonant hum of gongs. Somewhere ahead, a golden glow pulses in time with the sound, beckoning you forward. The fabric strip you've been carrying warms in your hand again, as if it recognizes this next destination. You can't shake the feeling that whatever lies ahead will make the archive's endless shelves feel small. The corridor opens into a cavern so vast you can't immediately see the far wall. Golden light pours from hundreds, maybe thousands, of lanterns suspended from long chains, each one swaying ever so slightly, casting rippling shadows over the stone. The chanting you heard before is louder now, but it's not coming from a single source. It's everywhere, above, below, even behind you, folding over itself in waves until it feels less like sound and more like a current you're wading through. The air is thick with incense, curling in slow spirals, carrying a scent you can't place, sweet at first, then bitter, then almost like rain on hot stone. Every breath fills your lungs with a weight that's not unpleasant, just significant. You step forward, your footfalls muffled against the smooth floor. Ahead, in the center of the space, stands a raised circular platform. Around it, rows of figures in hooded robes kneel in perfect stillness, their heads bowed. They don't move or acknowledge you, yet you get the impression they've known you were coming since before you entered the Underworld. At the heart of the platform is something both beautiful and unnerving, a wheel. Not the kind from a cart or a ship, but a towering construct of gold and black stone, its spokes embedded with gemstones that flicker in the lantern light. The wheel turns slowly, almost lazily, but with a steady rhythm, like the ticking of a giant clock. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. In many ancient Indian traditions, the wheel of samsara symbolized the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Standing here, watching it turn, you feel that idea take on a literal weight. This isn't just metaphor, it feels mechanical, functional, as though each rotation is shifting reality itself. You edge closer, weaving between the kneeling figures. None look up. The platform's steps are shallow, worn smooth by countless feet, and as you ascend, the hum of the wheel grows louder until it's less like a hum and more like a low vibration in your bones. At the base of the wheel sits an old man, or maybe not a man at all. His face is deeply lined, but his skin glows faintly, like metal under a thin layer of ash. His eyes are bright, reflecting the wheel's turning. In his lap rests a ledger bound in black leather, and beside him, a long, slender tool that looks part stylus, part key. Without a word, he dips the tool into the ledger, tracing a shape on its surface. The page ripples, not like paper, but like water. Then he gestures toward the strip of glowing cloth in your hand. You hesitate, and for a flicker of a moment, you remember a quirky tidbit. In certain West African beliefs, the spirits of the dead were said to carry threads of their earthly life into the afterworld, to be woven into the great fabric of existence. Those threads determined their fate in the cycles to come. Looking at the old man, you suddenly understand. You've been carrying your own thread. You place the cloth in his palm. He doesn't examine it, doesn't even glance down. He simply presses it to the turning wheel. The fabric melts into the gold and black stone, vanishing completely, but the wheel doesn't falter. It just keeps turning, smooth and patient. Then something strange happens. Your vision doubles. You see yourself still standing there, but you also see, simultaneously, hundreds of versions of yourself, each walking a different path. Some are short and abrupt, others stretch endlessly. Some glimmer with joy, others are heavy with sorrow. All are spinning away from this single moment, caught in the turning spokes. Historians still argue whether visions like this are symbolic, meant to represent the mind confronting infinity, or whether they're an actual glimpse into multiple realities. You, at least in this moment, don't feel like you're dealing with metaphor. When the doubling fades, the old man closes the ledger with a soft thump. He picks up the key-like tool and taps the base of the wheel twice. The chanting stops instantly. The kneeling figures rise in unison, turn, and walk silently toward the far end of the cavern. A great door there creaks open, spilling a pale silver light across the floor. The old man points to the door, then returns to watching the wheel turn, as if you've already left in his mind. You step down from the platform, the silence after the chanting almost dizzying. The silver light ahead calls to you, not warm like the lantern glow, but sharp, cool, clean. The air near it feels thinner, almost easier to breathe. As you approach the threshold, you realize the door doesn't open into another room. It opens onto a cliff. Far below, a river winds through darkness, its surface shimmering like molten metal. The sound of it is deep, resonant, like the distant roar of the ocean trapped underground. A narrow path hugs the cliffside, carved into the rock, leading downward toward the water. There are no railings, just the promise of a long descent into whatever lies beyond. The first step onto the cliffside path sends a puff of loose dust spiraling into the dark. It drifts for what feels like forever before vanishing into the river's glinting surface far below. The drop is enough to make your stomach tighten, not from fear exactly, but from the strange sense that you're being drawn toward the water, like gravity here has its own opinions. The path is barely wide enough for both feet side by side, and in some places it narrows so much you have to turn sideways. Your fingertips graze the cold rock of the cliff wall for balance. Every now and then, a faint vibration shivers through the stone, as if something enormous deep within it is shifting in its sleep. The air cools as you descend, carrying a dampness that sticks to your skin. The sharp, clean scent from before is now laced with something more organic, like moss growing on old brick after rain. You pause at a curve in the path and glance down. The river is closer now, and you can see the way its surface refuses to behave like normal water. Instead of reflecting light evenly, it seems to trap glimmers, holding them like a net full of fireflies. You recall a mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology, the underworld had several rivers, each with its own power. The Lethe, for forgetfulness, the Phlegethon for fire, the Styx for oaths. Standing here, you get the feeling this river doesn't match any of those exactly, though it might have been remembered as one of them by those who return to tell the tale. Halfway down, the path widens into a ledge where a stone bench juts from the wall. Seated there is a woman dressed in armor that looks forged from hammered moonlight. The plates are dull with age, dented in places, yet somehow still catch the silver glow from the river below. She leans on a spear whose tip flickers with faint blue light, as though it's been dipped in lightning. Her gaze fixes on you the moment you appear, but she doesn't speak. Instead, she tilts her head toward the river, then back to you, an unspoken question. You remember a quirky tidbit. In some obscure Norse sagas, warriors who failed to reach Valhalla weren't punished. They were given one final task in the underworld, often as guides or guardians for the living who strayed too far. The woman before you has that same aura, not here to harm you, but not here to make things easy either. You nod once, and that seems to be enough. She rises smoothly, the spear balanced casually in one hand, and begins walking down the path ahead of you. Her movements are soundless, and even when the ledge narrows dangerously, she seems unconcerned. The final stretch of the descent brings you within earshot of the river's true voice. Up close, its sound is less like ocean waves and more like countless whispers layered together, some frantic, some slow, some so faint you have to lean in to catch them. The woman stops where the path ends in a flat stone landing. Here, a narrow stair leads directly into the water, its steps swallowed by the shimmering current. She plants the spear beside her and points toward the water. Her voice, when it finally comes, is low and steady. Cross, and the underworld will show you its heart. Refuse, and the path will carry you back to the shadows above. Historians still argue whether ancient depictions of underworld rivers were symbolic thresholds, meant to represent the crossing from one state of being to another, or whether they described literal, tangible places. Here, there's no question. This is a place you can touch, smell, and step into. You kneel at the edge, letting your fingers dip into the current. It's colder than you expect, not icy, but so clean it feels like your skin is being stripped of something invisible. The whispers swell for a moment, then fade, as though acknowledging your presence. Without waiting for permission, the woman steps into the water. She wades until it reaches her waist, then glances back and gives a short, sharp nod. The glimmers in the river swirl around her like tiny stars drawn to orbit. You take a breath and follow. The cold cuts straight to your core, but it's not unpleasant. Each step sends little spirals of light swirling away from your legs, like you're disturbing a sleeping constellation. The current isn't strong, but it's insistent, nudging you forward toward the darker stretch at the far bank. Halfway across, you feel the bottom vanish beneath your feet. You're floating, weightless, the water supporting you as the glimmers swirl more thickly around your face. One brushes your cheek and you see, just for an instant, a memory that isn't yours, a child releasing a lantern into a summer sky. Another glimmer passes and you see a snow-covered field under a blood-red moon. When you reach the far side, the river simply lets you go. The woman climbs the bank without looking back, her armor dripping silver droplets that vanish before they touch the ground. She points toward a massive stone archway looming ahead, carved with symbols that seem to shift when you're not directly looking at them. Beyond it, a faint red light pulses like a heartbeat. The stone arch towers above you, its edges worn soft by ages of water and wind you can't feel here. The red light beyond it breathes in slow, steady pulses, illuminating the carvings in brief flashes before swallowing them back into shadow. You step closer, and the symbols seem to hum, not in sound exactly, but in the bones of your arms and chest. The guardian woman lingers at the threshold, spear planted firmly in the ground. She gives you one final, unreadable look, then turns and walks back toward the river, disappearing into the mist that hangs perpetually over the water's surface. You pass beneath the arch. The ground slopes upward now, each step pulling you toward the light. The air grows warmer, carrying a scent like iron and cedar smoke. The heartbeat pulse grows louder, though it doesn't sound like a heartbeat anymore. It's more like the slow tolling of a deep bell. At the top of the rise, the space opens into a cavern vast enough to hold a city. In its center is a throne, carved from the same black stone as the archway but shot through with veins of faintly glowing gold. The ruler of the underworld sits upon it, watching you. Their appearance shifts as you look, sometimes a man with eyes like eclipsed suns, sometimes a woman whose hair moves as though underwater, sometimes something with no gender at all, just a figure clothed in shadow and flame. You realize this is intentional. The underworld doesn't have a single face. It becomes whatever each soul expects to see at the end of the journey. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. In Mesopotamian myth, Ereshkigal was queen of the dead, ruling over Urkala with no escape for those who entered. Yet in other traditions, such as certain Orphic teachings, the ruler of the underworld could grant return to the living, if the price was right. The figure raises a hand, and the air stills entirely. You feel the weight of their attention, not oppressive but absolute. You have walked far, they say, voice neither loud nor quiet but filling every corner of the chamber. What do you seek? You hesitate. This isn't the moment for jokes or clever half-truths, though part of you considers saying Wi-Fi mostly. Instead, you tell them the truth. You want to return. You want to see the light again. They lean forward slightly. Every return changes you, they say, and every return takes something. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some Polynesian traditions, spirits who left the underworld without permission returned with a missing shadow, or one that was inverted, marking them forever. The ruler opens their palm. In it lies a small object, your choice, though you can't yet see what it is. Leave behind what you no longer need, they say, and the way will open. Historians still argue whether myths about such bargains were cautionary tales about death's finality or symbolic of personal transformation. You realize it doesn't matter. Whatever you leave here will be gone. You take the object. The moment you do, the cavern begins to fade, not suddenly, but like mist under morning sunlight. The throne dissolves into light, the walls stretch upward, and the ground beneath your feet tilts. You're climbing now, up a narrow shaft where warm air rises from below. Somewhere far above, the glow of daylight leaks through, bright and almost too white after so much shadow. The climb is long but not exhausting. You pass shelves of rock where pale flowers grow without sunlight, pools where tiny silver fish swim in spirals, ledges where wind hums a low, endless chord. Finally, you emerge into the dawn. The world is still damp from night, grass jeweled with dew. You take a deep breath of cool air, heavy with the scent of earth and green things, and feel the weight of the underworld settle somewhere deep inside you, quiet but permanent. You glance at your shadow. For a moment, it doesn't match your movement exactly. Then it falls into step. The air up here feels softer now, like it's cushioning each breath. Your heartbeat slows and the edges of sound grow rounder, less sharp. Somewhere behind you, the path to the underworld has already folded in on itself, as though it was never there at all. You sit in the grass, leaning back on your hands, watching the early sunlight filter through a thin veil of mist. Each ray catches tiny motes that drift lazily in the stillness, like the glimmers in that strange river, only warmer now, friendlier. It's easy to let your eyes close just for a moment. The weight of the journey, the trials, the bargains, they all begin to blur into something dreamlike, softened by the quiet here. The faces you saw, the voices you heard, the strange warmth of the throne room, they feel far away, like a story someone once told you under a blanket on a rainy night. The world hums faintly, a sound almost too low to notice unless you're listening for it. It feels like the earth's own steady breath, reassuring in its patience. You lie back fully now, letting the damp grass cool the skin along your arms and neck. The sky above is pale, barely touched by blue yet, as though the day hasn't quite made up its mind. Somewhere in that space between waking and sleep, you know the shadows you carry from the underworld aren't heavy. They're just reminders, threads tying you gently to a place most people will never walk. And as your breathing matches the slow rhythm of the earth beneath you, everything feels balanced. Everything feels still. Sweet dreams.